61 of the In a Nutshell podcast. I'm your host, Sean Vowells, and as usual, I am joined by Joe Meade. Tonight, Joe and I will go over a couple of the games in the opening week of college basketball in the Big Ten. Now, Joe, there were way too many games. Unfortunately, we can't get to them all, but we're going to start with the most surprising ones. There hasn't been any seriously surprising ones yet, but we are going to start with the team that were the runner-ups last year, the Purdue Boilermakers. They are 2-0. They beat Texas A&M Corpus Christi by 17. That game was a little close in the second half for comfort. And then they take down the Norse of Northern Kentucky today, 72-50. Joe, safe to say that Purdue expected a little bit better of a start.
Yeah, Sean, I'm not going to be one who looks too deep into this. I think one of the main positive things, I know as an Indiana fan, you might earth them a bit, and for some of our conference snobs, particularly Purdue snobs, who really want them to be over the top the year after they made the Natty, I want to highlight Fletcher Lawyer in their first game. 21 points. We know Braden Smith, he's going to be their best player. If he could get a Robin in there, I think that would be very good for them. And I think Fletcher Lawyer in the Texas A&M Corpus Christi game certainly was that. Now, if you look at the game this evening,
16 tonight.
and another 16 tonight, you know, 4 of 5 from 3. Is he going to sustain that every game? Probably not, but more often than not, he'll shoot 40% from 3. So if he takes more of those, I'd actually prefer to see him take more of those three-point shots, Sean. And I know defenses could game plan against that a lot more now without the presence of Zach Edey. But, as it stands, I think that's the main thing I take away as Purdue. Braden Smith didn't do as well as most people probably would have expected in his first 2 games, but I do think that's going to come along. And we're in the first week of the season. I'm pretty sure they're going to figure out some things to get him open. Trey Kaufman-Red, I'm expecting a little more. Only 24 minutes tonight, only 14. Was 4 of 5 from the field. I would like to see one of Kaufman-Red and Lawyer get some more looks, especially from 3 for Lawyer and Kaufman-Red just in general on the floor.
A couple of things. They're still working out what kind of lineups work best for them, and they tried a ton of them in both these games, whether it was Jacobson at the 5 or Berg off the bench, or even just sliding Kaufman-Red up there. But I do think they are still experimenting with what works. They do know that Braden Smith is a really good player, and I think that's about it. He 15 and 12 and 7 in the first game, nearly a triple-double, and then 11 and 7 today. But he's been really good. He probably will get multiple triple-doubles this year. Lawyer has obviously stepped up into that more consistent role that we've seen. And offensively, I do think they look all right, Joe. But defensively, they did improve tonight defensively, but in game one, they looked lost at times. Really just running in circles around the Texas A&M Corpus Christi players. They were giving up a ton of open looks, and had they not gone 6 for 19 from 3, I think that game could have been really, really close down the stretch. But defensively, it's definitely a primary concern so far for Purdue.
Yeah, Sean, and I'm sure that's going to be a theme we see throughout tonight. There's going to be one of the teams I'm really going to praise. I'm not going to spoil it. You're going to have to listen on. I thought offensively was spectacular, but the defense posed some concerns. But we'll get into that later.
And Daniel Jacobson just 1 minute today, Joe. I would have to think that is an injury-related reason why he only played 1 minute. Berg, 17 minutes, Burgess 12 minutes off the bench tonight. And Miles Colvin first, Heidi, some of the more usual suspects for Purdue. They're all going to play a role this year. They do have a deep team, but maybe finding out exactly who's who might take a little bit of time for Purdue. All right, up next, Joe, we're going to go to the other school in Indiana. It's the Indiana Hoosiers. They only played 1 game this week. They did beat SIU Edwardsville by 19. They were in control for most of this game, up double digits at halftime, and really kept it there for most of this. And the standout performer for the Hoosiers was Mackenzie Mbako, 31 points, 9 rebounds in 28 minutes. Mbako's he's a breakout candidate for this year, that's for sure.
Yeah, Sean, and that's another thing. We ranked Indiana. I think a lot of national writers ranked Indiana within their top three. I think the worst I've ever seen them was like 4 or 5, which is still the upper class of this conference. And it was really relying on Malik Renew and someone else popping off, whether it was going to be an Umar Ballo, Mackenzie Mbako, maybe even in an ideal world of Bryson Tucker, who did get 15 minutes. I think he struggled a bit, but like I said, that's going to be a project that's going to be added onto throughout the season. Mackenzie Mbako, though, you look at these numbers, 13 to 17, 4 of 5 from three. Uh, didn't even have to go to the line all that often either, Sean, which is really impressive to get 31, only shooting and making one free throw. Uh, is this going to be a consistent thing, Sean, you think?
I mean, no, because
Well, the 31, of course
they
not.
have enough good players to afford a bad game. I thought his movement looked a lot better, especially on defense. Early in the year, when he's playing the three against these small teams, he was getting abused defensively, and he wasn't even on the floor in the stretch run of those games. They went with the extra guard, and but he looked a lot smoother, a lot quicker, a lot stronger this time around. He had a couple of really nice cuts to the basket and good finishes through contact. He played a lot of minutes at the four, and I think that he is going to be a really good player this year. And if he has another good game, then maybe we could talk about him being a star. But the point is, Joe, is Indiana has a lot of good players, and Cannon Carlisle had 0 points, Bryson Tucker had 2, Luke Goody had 0, and Trey Galloway had 6, and you still won the game handily. You're going to get double digits from Ballo every night. You're going to get double digits from Renew, Rice, and probably Mbako too. But to get basically nothing outside of your top four players and to still win handily, impressive in my opinion. Obviously, they didn't cover the spread, and they didn't cover a single non-conference game last year, if you remember. So the Indiana fans certainly worrying, but this one still wasn't close. There were a lot of close ones last year, whether it was Florida Gulf Coast or Army or Morehead State, or there's 2 or 3 more that were really way too close. But so far, this one wasn't. And this team, SIUE, is in action right now against another Big Ten team, and they're hanging tough. So, still some more of the same concerns for Indiana. The rebounding was really poor, especially when Ballo was off the floor. They did give up a lot of threes, but not necessarily in the same manner that they have 3-point attempts. They were just 5 for 26. But I do think, Joe, the concerns from last year are more the same. They just have a little bit better players.
Yeah, Sean, and I think this is going to be a theme throughout this podcast. I think one game over extrapolating it is going to be a mistake, but I'll put it to you this way. Shaw watches more Hoosier basketball than anyone. I think that could be a slight point of concern uh, if it transpires throughout conference play. But as of now, we're, barely 3% through the season. So I think we'll have a right to pause on that.
All right, Joe, we'll go to another team that is supposed to finish near the top of the conference. And in my opinion, it's probably been the most impressive team in the Big Ten so far, at least through the first game. Their second game is going on right now, and that's Illinois. They beat Eastern Illinois 112 to 67. They get a number of huge games. Will Riley, the headliner off the bench, 31 points in just 25 minutes. Dre Gibbs Longhorn has 20 points off the bench. Jack Ashonis has 11, 7, and 5. He's on triple-double watch again tonight. Ivisic played well. Humrekhaus played well. Joe, are you a little bit surprised how quickly these pieces are fitting together?
I'm really surprised that Will Riley, the freshman's come on the way he has. Now, I'm not going to overreact to a 31-point game, whether it's from a Mackenzie Mbako, who's likely to be a breakout star of this conference, or a freshman. What I will say is this gives Illinois a lot of options. You look at that game, Kylan Boswell didn't have to do anything.
And he's
I
got
think he
0
scored
tonight, too.
yeah, I think he scored all the 5 points. I'm not going to critique him. He clearly is going to have much better stat lines than the way he did in the opener. You're also going to see Yakashonis. I think he's a guy based on his tape that could go for 20 a night, and the triple double is going to be something to watch. I think he was a pro-ready prospect. Truthfully, I think he has potential to be a first rounder. I think that was his ceiling on a lot of scouting reports, and you're kind of seeing it a little on display. I think you will fully see it by December or January when he's playing significant competition, and he's going to be relied on a lot more than guys on this bench. But Sean, Illinois offensively seems to have as many options as ever, and for Brad Underwood, this is the infancy stages of this team. I can't imagine what it will look like in February and March.
And Joe, they're also playing SIU at Edwardsville, and they have pulled away here. They are up by 19 at the under 8 timeout. But Joe, they've Will Riley has 10-7 in tonight's game. Yakashonis has 7-9-7. Another triple double watch. Ivisic is in double digits. Humrickhouse is in double digits. They have Kerry Booth off the bench. They have Merez Johnson off the bench. I mean, they have a serious amount of question marks coming into this season. And so far, Joe, almost all of them have been pretty impressive. And I'm not saying people really doubted them, but it would not have been the most surprising thing to see them stumble out of the blocks a little bit as they're trying to find their new roles, sort of like Purdue. And that's just not really happening. They've been impressive so far. They're headed to 2-0. And they do play Oakland next Wednesday before they head down to Alabama to play the Crimson Tide. And that's one already that it will be a pretty good one.
Absolutely, Sean.
All right, up next, Joe, we've got Michigan State. The Spartans are 2-0 after yesterday's win. They beat Monmouth 81-57 in the opener. A number of impressive games there, most notably Jaden Akins. And then they go to 2-0 after beating Niagara 96-60. That game was a little bit close in the first half, but the Spartans win the second half by almost 30. And you get a number of big games and a 20-point effort from Jackson Kohler. Surprising, to say the least. But the Spartans so far, Joe, have done the job, and they have beaten these bad teams.
Yeah, Sean, and that's something last year, Michigan State. It's not even the James Madison game. Just they didn't find their identity as a team. Now, am I going to say week 1 of the season they found it? No. But I think they found game plans. They found offensive solutions pretty early on. Last year, you had Tyson Walker, who was, frankly, had allowed Tom Izzo and the coaching staff to be lazy in game plans. Now, I'm not calling Tom Izzo lazy. I'm not going to critique that aspect of his coaching. But Tyson Walker got you out of a lot of sticky situations. This year, I think Jaden Akins is going to be the guy you're going to have to ride. I think the first game was an indication of that. I think last night, him having 10 points, 5 of 11, I thought he had a pretty good game, just 0 of 3 from the three-point. It's something he doesn't do very often. He's a very reliable three-point shooter, in my opinion, and he's a very smart three-point shooter, so I don't think that's going to be a repeat. He will be a repeat offender in that department. I think the Jackson Kohler 20-point game, I don't want to overreact to one 20-point game at all. I think he's a solid player. I'd be surprised to see him starting consistently. I know he plays starter minutes. He can play anywhere from 18 to 25, depending on the situation. I want to highlight Jace Richardson. His dad notably played for Tom Izzo. Jace is obviously starting off pretty well with Trey Holloman, 11 points off the bench. I think this is the biggest thing I like about Michigan State this year. I think a lot of their starters, even a Big Z, there's a lot of guys that can start. I don't think they'll have a consistent starting 5 for most of the year. What I think they'll have is, eight or nine guys that could all contribute in different ways and not negative contributions. I felt like in years past, Carson Cooper and Jackson Kohler would be on there just trying to steal minutes. This year, I think they're going to be more in use. I don't think it's going to be about stealing minutes. I think it'll be more about suiting game plans, suiting matchups, and I think that's what's exciting for Michigan State. You don't have a star player like Tyson Walker. I think Fears Jr. is someone who can achieve that. 8 assists in each game is a really positive sign. He's not going to score a lot, but if he can facilitate the offense like that, Tom Izzo might have something working on early. And I don't think they will beat Kansas. I'll be very clear. I think they will actually get dominated down low to such an overwhelming extent that game could be out of hand. But I do think they have some positive pieces to work with.
I think Tom Izzo's going to have a lot of tough decisions to make here, Joe, because the way that they're playing and a couple of the freshmen are getting sparing minutes off the bench, but they are playing 10 players at least 14 minutes. Now, I do think that it's going to have to cut down. You're going to have to roll with some guys for 30 minutes, and it's probably Akins for sure, maybe Fiddler as well, but I do think he could run into some issues with just having so many players play so few minutes, if that makes sense. And there are teams who have done that to some success, but that's typically not how Tom Izzo has operated. And I do think you might see a couple of miss performances because they just don't have a go-to guy right now, and that sometimes for teams that's a positive. You have a bunch of options, and some teams, you don't know who to give the ball to when you need a bucket. So that is something to watch out for here as they go into the Champions Classic next Tuesday, as you mentioned, and they're going to have two or three people really step up to compete in that game because we just saw Kansas. They looked great, they looked bad, and then they looked great again just a couple minutes ago against North Carolina. So that'll be. I do think Michigan State stock up a little bit for them since the start of the year. I do give them a little more of a chance to win that game against Kansas than I did last week, but it will be tough, that's for sure. All right, Joe. Up next is the Michigan Wolverines. Just one game, and it was an impressive one, 101-53 over the Cleveland State Vikings. And Dusty May starts off his tenure with a big win. 6 players in double digits, 68% from the field, 56% from behind the arc. A+ for Dusty May in game 1.
Absolutely an A+, Sean. I think kind of like Tom Izzo, but in a different manner. Because a lot of these pieces, I mean, aside from Will Shedder and Namari, who didn't do much of anything in game 1, these are all new pieces to Michigan fans. Now, I know what a lot of people are going to think Ronnie Gale is not a new piece at all, but he didn't even have to go all out, Sean. He kind of looked like a lot of people assumed him and Vlad Golden would be the stars of this team and they'd carry the team to a lot of victories. I don't doubt that either, but I don't think it's going to be to the extent people imagined. I don't think Roddy's going to have to put up 25 or Golden's going to have to put up 25. I think they could each put up a modest 15 to 16 and expect one of Danny Wolf, one of a Will Shedder, one of even an LJ Casey, who's probably the best 3-star in the country as of right now. And then you have Trey Donaldson, who facilitated assists, didn't turn the ball over once, Sean, for a point guard at Michigan. I love Doug McDaniel, and he's a phenomenal player who's going to do great things at Kansas State this year. Turnovers were like his middle name. I mean, it happens so often. You go to the bathroom and you turn the ball over twice. So, with that said, Sean, Michigan offensively can do so much. They can shoot with Walters. They can space the floor. They get to the hole effectively. And that's really what modern basketball is. It's refreshing to see a Michigan basketball team that shoots good threes, loves going to the rim, doesn't settle for any mid-range jumpers, and has guys like Danny Wolf who are 7 feet but can play the floor and can really outbig certain lineups, something Michigan, even with Hunter Dickinson, couldn't do to an extent. So they play Wake Forest on Sunday. I think that's a great test in Greensboro, a neutral game, but really a road game in my opinion. If they win that, that's a quad 1 win early. And let's face it, Sean, I don't think Michigan will be favored, or I'm expecting them to, or
I think they should be. Wake stinks.
But Wake has not played well. I think they have the potential to play well, and perhaps a home crowd against a blue blood like Michigan can do that for them. But I do expect Michigan to contend in this game for a while. And frankly, Sean, I think having the expectation that they should win is unfair, like one game in. But I think it should be a 50-50 at least.
I think Michigan should win this. Wake Forest is, Salas is good, and they have a couple of good players. They don't really have a bench. They don't really have a bench, and I think Michigan should be able to win that basketball game. And it's Sunday at 1. I don't think it'll be a crazy tough crowd to play in at a neutral in the Greensboro Coliseum there. Wake, that's where the ACC tournament has been, and the crowds haven't been amazing for Wake there. So maybe I think you can go down there and win. And I think you are the better basketball team. Now, sometimes the better team doesn't always win, but it's a good opportunity to pick up a quad 1 win. Joe, there's not many quad 1 games out there this early for teams that and it's a good chance for one, and it likely will stay 1 too because it's on the neutral. All right, Joe, we got 2 more teams I want to talk about before we preview some of the games tomorrow. First, we're going to talk about the team that went out to Vegas, Ohio State. They knock off Rodney Terry and the Texas Longhorns 80-72. Wire to wire, the Buckeyes win it with 4 players in double figures. Bruce Thornton with 20 and a couple of impressive contributors off the bench. But, Joe, this was an impressive one for the Buckeyes.
I think they're my team of the week, and that's crazy to say based off one game against the Texas team. I know they won tonight, but against the Texas team that a lot of people are suspect of. I think they'll make the tournament, but to put them in the top 20 this early, a lot of people questioned. But I think a lot of those questions are going to come from the fact Ohio State trounced them. This 80-72, that was a deceptive scoreline. I thought Ohio State had a firm control of this game from the opening tip. We mentioned Bruce Thornton with 20 points. That's going to be a consistent thing we're going to see most of this year. I thought even last year he was the one of the premier players in the conference, albeit it was on a team that massively underperformed until February. And that's why I picked him on my first team, Sean. I think he's going to be up there with one of the leading scorers of the conference. I think he's going to have no choice. Michi Johnson, I just want to say 2 of 11. That's definitely not good enough. I highly doubt that'll be repeated. The surprise of the night to me, Sean, was Micah Parrish. Devin Royal, 16 points. We know he has talent. And, John Mobley Jr. off the bench, another recruit from Ohio that we expect to be good. So even the 14 points, while impressive, I was more pleasantly surprised for the Buckeyes for Micah Parrish. 17 points, 4 of 5. I mean, 3 of 6 from three, 4 of 5 from the strike, and he really allowed them to move the ball well. Had 5 assists, something you don't see a lot as a 3-man. So I look at the offense, Sean. I look at the fact Michi didn't have a great game. I look at the fact that Bradshaw and Stewart did next to nothing. I mean, they were in there for almost less than half of the game, and they relied on Devin Royal, even Evan Mahaffey, albeit not in the stat sheet a lot, but getting rebounds. This is an Ohio State team. I think that's going to surprise a lot of people, which is why I picked them pretty high in this conference.
The big surprising thing, Joe, was that they were still able to do what they wanted for the most part and control the game with their 2 forwards, Stewart and Bradshaw, having a combined 4 points.
Right.
They're not going to do that very often. And the fact that you're still able to beat a good team on a neutral, that's impressive. The starting 5, I think, for Ohio State is really good. And when you get contributions off the bench, it's going to be tough to beat them. And Jake Diebler, a lot of people are comparing him to Rodney Terry, and the fact that they're both interims who are then, hired full-time due to their performance as the interim. And it looks like Diebler won round 1 of the interim bowl right there. They play Monday night against Youngstown State before heading on the road next Friday to play Texas A&M, a team that's already lost a game and a team that came into their place last year and beat them. So they've got revenge on the mind there before a bunch of bye games before conference play. But, Joe, we got one more team that we want to talk about here, and it is a team that the coaches did not respect in the coaches poll. We put them certainly near the middle of the conference, and it's the Northwestern Wildcats. They take down Lehigh 90-46 as just 15-point favorites. Northwestern, life without Boo Buie starts off well. They are missing Brooks Barnheiser still. Not really sure when he's going to come back, but you get a great game from Nick Martinelli. Barry, Leach, Wyndham in double figures, Hunger in double figures off the bench. This was an impressive one for the purple and white.
Yeah, Sean, and this is just balanced scoring. I know your boy Jalen Leach didn't go off the way not yet.
Take 12, 5, and 6.
Yeah, but that's not even a terrible stat line. I think with Nicholson doing as limited as he did in this game, the fact there's some bench contribution is a plus. I mean, I can't remember. I think the biggest emphasis Northwestern should have this non-conference season, depending on when Barnheiser comes back or not, is try to find 2 or 3 guys off the bench. I know Northwestern's overperformed. That's been the theme of the Collins era. Overperformance, making NCAA tournaments, winning huge road games, and winning at home. I think if they could get 2 or 3 guys off the bench that could be consistent contributors, that would be my biggest goal for this non-conference for Northwestern. I think the scoring production was great, especially without Barnheiser. Do I think they're going to be putting up 90 every game? I don't. But I do think that if they could get these guys off the bench, Sean, especially because one of these guys, whether it's a Leach, whether it's a Wyndham, being that Barnheiser's going to demote one of them, I think that could be a start. And then if a Hunger or someone else off the bench contributes, Northwestern might have something cooking, and maybe they achieve above the middle, where a lot of coaches didn't even see them. Maybe they finish top 5, dare I say it.
Yeah, and I was impressed with this one. I did watch it mostly for Leach and an oratory prep grad on the other team, Tommy Conniff on Lehigh. But I did not see this being this lopsided. And credit to Northwestern for getting the job done there. A very interesting one tomorrow for them, Joe, as they head across the state of Indiana and Ohio to play Dayton on the road, and the Flyers are slight favorites. And the Flyers have a pretty good team with a number of recognizable players. Zed Key from Ohio State is there, Malachi Smith, a different one from the Gonzaga one last year. He's there, Posh Alexander, the former St. Johnson Butler player. So it's a good opportunity for Northwestern to get a win on the road tomorrow. And if they win that, Joe, I think they'll get the people's attention. That's for sure.
Yeah, Sean. And one thing I want to highlight, just overall, especially with Northwestern going to Dayton, Michigan playing at Wake Forest, certainly a Michigan State playing Kansas, and all these other games we're going to see. One thing the Big Ten, and based on the scores, how they're looking as of 10 p.m. Eastern on Friday, the Big Ten did embarrass itself this week. I think last year you had a few of those, particularly a Michigan State to James Madison, but you look at that in the context of the season, not very bad at all.
Yeah, James Madison won a tournament game.
I mean, they blanked Wisconsin.
Yeah.
And Wisconsin was the Big Ten tournament runner-up. My point is, you avoided the Villanova. You avoided the Butler tonight. As a whole, as a conference, I'd be very happy with that. I don't think, Sean, correct me if I'm wrong, I think the Big Ten's undefeated.
Yeah, I was just going over it while you were talking there, Joe. There's been a couple close calls, Washington, USC, but as of this moment right now, there is not a Big Ten team that's lost. The 2 games in progress are going to go the Big Ten's way, and then there's 2 more tonight. New Mexico at UCLA could be one where the Big Ten team runs into an issue, but Joe, so far so good, and Big Ten has not fallen into any traps, and like you said, a couple other teams have across the country.
Yeah, Sean, and as a whole, that's good. And I know a lot of Big Ten fans. If you're an Ohio State fan, I know you don't like Michigan. If you're an Indiana fan, I know you don't love Purdue, Northwestern, Illinois. We could go on and on and on. My point's always been, and Sean's has stayed consistent throughout. This is our 3rd year doing this. You want the Big Ten to win out of conference games because it's going to benefit you in the end, whether you win or lose to the team you're playing against. So, for now, you can enjoy watching your rivals destroy other teams. And I'm not going to lie, I thought Ohio State beating Texas was a very enjoyable watch. So, yeah, Sean, a good start to the season for the Big Ten. I do think we're going to run into some trouble as a conference next week. Nothing bad. Well, hopefully no Q4, Q3 losses. But, a few losses here and there. But I do think we're going to learn a lot more about these teams as we go on. 1 or 2 games isn't a great sample size quite yet.
And a week from tomorrow, Joe, is the big day where there's a ton of non-conference games. And obviously we'll do an episode until then. We have the Wake Forest Michigan game tomorrow. The Northwestern Dayton game, as I also mentioned. Washington visits Nevada, potential power conference road game there, and then you have a couple of bye games, and then Champions Classic Tuesday, which will probably be back either before or just after. So Joe, perfect timing here on the videos. We're trying to keep these videos around a half an hour, and that's all we have for you today. Thank you for tuning in. And be sure to check out the other content on our channel, YouTube, Instagram, TikTok, all